everybody, and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bridget, and I am a filmmaker and animator in New York City, and I am just so excited to be sharing my practice with you all. I'm going to go ahead and review a little bit of what we've done in the last few classes. So we have been taking these last 4 weeks to learn all about how to create your own stop motion animation from the comfort of your home and ways to engage kids in the process. And today is the very last class, which is exciting and sad. But I'm hoping today you will really learn how to finalize your film. So we've already learned how to set up your animation station at home using things like books and boxes. We've learned what stop motion is and how to do it with things you can find from home. We learned how to write stories together. We learned how to make puppets, how to make props and sets, and how to use those things specifically for animating. And today we are going to learn a little bit about sound effects and audio. And we're also going to learn how to put it all together and edit things. And before we do all that, we're going to go over the production process. And so I want to note one thing before we get started. Today I'm going to be teaching everybody how to edit using Stop Motion Studio, which is the app that you all have already downloaded and have been using for the last few weeks. Because I just thought that that was really the easiest way to show you how to edit, and it's pretty easy to do it on the app. It's not, the most fancy of edit you'll get, but it will definitely bring your story together and produce a product that you're really proud of. But that being said, if you are somebody who already knows how to edit, if you use a different software like iMovie or Premiere Pro or, Final Cut even, you can export your stop motion from Stop Motion Studio, and you can import it into any of those softwares and then edit like usual. If you have not ever used any of those softwares but you want to, today I hope will be really useful for you in learning basic tools and tricks for editing that you can apply to other softwares. So all that being said, we are going to learn on Stop Motion Studio, but I'm hoping that you'll be able to take everything you learned today and apply it to any software that you use. So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into what I like to call the production process. And so I think it's really useful to kind of take a very zoomed out view of what we are doing and look at the process of filmmaking as a whole. So I'm going to show you the 6 steps to making a film, and we're already on step 5. So, we're already most of the way there, but I want to put a name to every step that we have done together. And these are the steps that people use in, professional Hollywood films like Avengers and small films like Fluffy McCloud, which we all worked or watched together. These are the steps that every single filmmaker has ever used. And I want to put a name to it to show you that we are mimicking those processes and doing the exact same thing in our home films. So there are 6 steps, like I said. So I want everybody to think, what could possibly be the very first step of making a film? The very, very first step of making a film, what could it be? So the first step is coming up with an idea. I know it's backwards for you guys, but I hope you get the message. So the first step is coming up with an idea. So this is the moment when, maybe your kids came up to you and said, oh, I want to make a movie about a superhero. Or in Hollywood, this is the moment when you go into an executive's office and you say, I have a pitch for an idea. This is what I want to make a film about. And then the producer says yes or no. So then after you have your idea, you've got your big idea of what you want to make a film about, what is the next step? So this is something that we all did together already, and that's writing, and then oftentimes rewriting. So this is where the script comes together. When all of us were doing our writing, our narrative part of this, we came up with a beginning, middle, and end, and then we came up with a storyboard. That's all part of the writing process, right? So we're taking our idea and we're fleshing it out. And then what's the third step? So the third step is something that looks different depending on the kind of film you are making. For us, it's a pretty clear step. The third step is called pre-production. So if we think about that word, pre-production, it's everything that happens before we start filming. And so for an animation, it's a very clear step. This is when we're making things. So pre-production looks like making our puppets, making our sets, setting up our animation station to, be the right angle and the right height. Pre-production is, I don't want to say it's storyboarding because we are kind of including storyboarding in the writing process, but I think pre-production is maybe looking at your storyboard and planning it out, saying, when are we going to shoot which scene? When do we need which puppets? So all of that falls under pre-production. If you are creating a live action film, pre-production means casting your actors, scouting your location, finding your costumes. All of that is part of pre-production. So it's a little different with animation, but it still falls under doing everything you need to set you up for success when you start animating. So pre-production is a really, really important step to do thoughtfully and carefully. And I think when we bring kids into the process of pre-production, that's how I always like to frame it. The more you work on pre-production, the easier your production is going to be. So that brings us, of course, to the fourth step, which is production. So I'm hoping that a lot of you have already started this step. I'm hoping that whatever film you all came up with, you are ready to animate it. You've made most of your props and your puppets and your sets, and you're excited to start animating. And production, I think, can be a really, really fun process, but it can also be really stressful because you have a lot to get done and you have a really big vision. So when you start animating, definitely do it with kindness and taking breaks and eating a lot of snacks. That's my best recommendation for the production. All right, and so then today we are on step 5. So if we had pre-production, step 5 is, of course, post-production. So I like to think of this as, even take it way, way back when we were filming with actual physical film. I like to think of post-production as you get your reels of raw film, and everything after you get those reels is in post-production. So it's the same with us, right? Except they're not physical reels. Instead, we have these long chunks of animations, right, that are in our animation software. So post-production is everything we do after we've created those clips, after we've created that raw footage of animation. And so this includes a lot of different things. One thing it includes is manipulating the image, maybe zooming in, making the colors brighter, flipping it around. It also includes the actual edit of it, which means putting it in the right order. And then it includes audio. For animation, we're not recording sound one frame at a time, right? And so all of the audio that we do is added afterwards, and that's part of the post-production process. Okay, so the very last step is one that I want to talk about a little bit more in depth with you all. So what happens now? We've created this beautiful film. We've got it. It has a title, it has credits at the end, it has music, it's a beautiful film. So I really want you to ask yourselves, now what? Now that we have our film, what are we going to do with it? So this step is called distribution. And when we think of distribution, oftentimes we think of it in a professional scale, right? We think of Hollywood and they distribute their films across movie theaters and get a Netflix deal, right? That's what we think of when we think of distribution. But I really encourage you to think about it in your own life and think about it really seriously. Once you make this film, are you going to set up a space in your house to look like a movie theater and show it to your family? In this crazy time of COVID, I think it's really important to use art as a way to connect with people that we can't connect with in person. So, who are you going to send it to? How are you going to send it? Are you going to send it along with some artwork? Are you going to send it with a letter explaining what you did? Are you going to put it on a website? So, I think we need to really take the distribution process seriously with our home videos because that's why we're making it, right? We need to make it with an audience in mind so that we can make sure that our art is shared with the people that we love. So I really encourage you to take some time this week after you've made your film, or maybe while you're making your film, to talk to your family about where do we want this film to go? Who do we want to see this film? So just to review, we have our 6 steps that we've already done. We've got our idea, and then we write our scripts or our storyboards. Then we have our pre-production where we're making everything, really setting everything up. Then we have production. This is when we actually animate. Post-production, which we're going to learn all about today. Everything today is dedicated to step 5. And then we have distribution. So these are the 6 steps of any filmmaking. And I just want you all to give yourselves a pat on the back because you've made it all the way through to step 5 today. So we're really, really making a movie just like the professionals do it. Okay, so my desk is not big enough for all of my things. So now we can kind of get into the world of post-production. So I want us to accomplish 2 things today. The first thing is we're going to talk a little bit about sound effects. I know in the last few classes we've kind of talked about, or I've kind of discouraged you from using dialogue. Today, when we talk about sound effects, I think it's a nice replacement for dialogue because you can do a lot of it at home. It's really fun to do, and it really elevates your film. So I'm gonna show you a little clip of a film that I think uses sound effects really well. And then after that, we're gonna just dive really far into editing, and I'll show you all of the nuances of the software. So we are going to watch a film by somebody named Alex Gildies. It's called Clay Magic, or Magic Clay. And as you watch it, I just want you to think about what are these sound effects, and I also want you to think, would this film be as successful, as effective, if there wasn't any sound? Okay, so Hara and Alex, I think we're ready to show the first film. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, obviously, um, the filmmaker really used a lot of sound effects, right? There are a lot of different sound effects. Pretty much every moment, every action was accompanied by a sound effect. And I think two things they did really well. The first was that the timing of the sound effects was really effective, right? It was every time something hit another object or when it moved, when it became a shape. It kind of marked the action of the film. And the second thing I think they did really well was they used sound that you maybe weren't expecting, sound that clay doesn't necessarily make, right? Like the clinking glass sound, that's not what it sounds like when clay hits together. And it made it really effective. And so looking at your own films, what sound effects can you add to either exemplify or amplify what's going on in the scene? If there's bubbles popping, how do you make a bubble popping sound? Or if there's a thunderstorm, how do you make those sound? Or how is it adding something that the audience wouldn't know unless there was a sound effect? For example, if two characters are falling in love, what sound effect? What does that sound like, right? And so it's a way to send a message to the audience without using dialogue. Something else I wanted to point out with that film is that's a really great setup for simple 3D, right? Upright, upshoot, stop motion animation with your kids. If you notice, there wasn't really a set behind him, it was just his desk. And the camera was just set up right here, and his hands were here. And so, if you want to make a stop motion animation using clay and having the camera, shooting upright instead of shooting down, I think that's a really wonderful example. Watching Magic Clay is a great way to start, of literally just manipulating clay with a simple background. And it can be really effective and really fun to do, and can also lead you to making some maybe more advanced upshoot animations like Wallace and Gromit. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to touch on for sound effects is use what's in your house. I love having, you know, making noises with your hands on the ground or on a table is really great, but also crumpling paper or just finding any objects in your house and banging them together and listening to what that sounds like and seeing if that's the right sound effect you want. That can be really fun, and it can take a lot of time. Or also, creating noisemakers in a really easy way with rubber bands or a can with rocks in it. All of that can be really fun, and you can be really creative with it. So I encourage you to look around your house and see what you can find to make some simple sound effects. Okay, so we are going to spend the rest of the class learning how to edit your film using Stop Motion Studio. So what I did is the film that we worked on last week with the fish, we had the bigger body of the fish eating something, swimming along, and then eating something. And then I also had kind of a close up of its face. And so using Stop Motion Studio, I edited those together to make a very short film that's about 12 seconds long. One thing to note is that the animations themselves, I think each one was only 1 second or 2 seconds long. And so I was able to expand 4 seconds to 12 seconds just using Stop Motion Studio. So I'll show you how to do that. I repeated a lot of things. I held a lot of frames. And then I added a little bit of dialogue, a little bit of sound effects, and a little bit of music, and cut it together in a way that kind of made a narrative story. Of course, I wasn't planning a story before this. I didn't think it through as well as hopefully you all are thinking through your films. I'm really just using it as an example so that we can kind of work backwards from it, and I can show you what I did. But it's definitely not as well thought out as I'm sure your films will be. So yeah, so we're gonna watch it and then I'll show you a little PowerPoint and we'll work backwards and show you what I did. So Alex and Hara, I think we're ready for the second film. Good morning. I'm so hungry. Where's the food? Yum. And that's it. So it's very short, very simple. Obviously, he was swimming along, he was mad because he was hungry, and then he found food. Easy peasy. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and let's figure out how I made this. So we're going to learn 3 different things that need to take place when you're doing post-production. The first is manipulating the image. The second is editing it together, so putting it in the right order. And the third is adding audio. So let's start with image. So this is your stop motion studio app. These should be your, these are all the films that we made together. So you're going to go ahead and click whichever film you want to work on. And this is the screen that should pop up. I'm going to label a couple things and just to point out the language that we're going to use. And this is the language that's used in every editing software. So I hope that it will be helpful for you. So I'm going to call this screen up here my project monitor. So that means it's going to play exactly what I want it to play, right? This is showing me my project. And down here is my timeline. So these are my frames all in a row. From left to right, they go chronologically, right? This is at 0.0 seconds all the way to however many seconds my film is. So when I play my timeline, it'll show up on my project monitor. So these are the 2 things I'm going to say. So to manipulate our image, you would click a frame, whichever frame you want to work with, and you will click this edit button. Pretty easy, it has a little paintbrush. I think it's pretty intuitive. And this is the screen that's going to pop up. So 2 things you can do on this first screen. The first thing is if you click this little guy, you can zoom in. So let's say I wanted to cut out this shell. Let's say I want to zoom in on just see his eye. I could zoom in and then you press done and then it zoomed in for you. Remember that every frame is only 1/12 of a second. And so if you are applying something to one frame, you need to apply it to several frames in order for us to get the idea. And you can do that by pressing this arrow button. The next thing you can do on this screen is you press this little plus button and you can do all of these things. So you can add a drawing, a text, a shape, a background, whatever. So this is really helpful if you want to add a title or a credit. This is a great way to do it. If you just want to draw a little bit and kind of have some drawing animation, that could be cool. Again, just keep in mind that this is only adding to one frame. So you need to copy and paste it onto all of your frames. Sorry, there's a loud truck outside. All right, so then if you press this little button up here, this edit button, you get this. And so this is where you can adjust your color, your brightness, and you can flip it. So for me, I don't know if you remember, but when I was filming it in a way that you all could see. So it ended up being upside down for me. So I had to go through and flip all of my frames around. And this is where you do it, right? You go edit, edit, and in here. Again, no matter what editing software you're using, these buttons are all available. Every editing software has the ability to rotate something and to change the color of something. It's just a matter of where those buttons are. So I'm showing you where they are in Stop Motion Studio, but if you're using iMovie or Premiere Pro, just look for similar language, right? Going to an edit, going to an image, going to a rotate. Those are the buttons or the signals that you will find. Okay, so let's move on to editing. So again, editing means um, putting things in the order that you want them to be. Simple as that. That's what editing is. So in Stop Motion Studio, it's actually pretty intuitive once you get the hang of it. So here we are back in our timeline. Remember, down here's our timeline, up here's our project monitor. So the first thing that's really easy to do, let's say I wanted this frame to last a lot longer. If you think back to the film I made, I think I had him closing his eyes for a little bit longer. I had the facial expressions last a little bit longer. And so what you do is you click a frame, and then you're just literally going to press copy and paste. So you're going to copy it, and then when you paste it, it'll show up on the frame before. And so that's how you can elongate something. So let's say you had him smiling, but it only lasted one frame, and you want it to last a whole second, you would copy and paste it 12 times, and that would be a second. In this little menu, you can also delete a frame. You know, if you accidentally get your finger in it or something that you don't want in it, you can delete it. And then the really cool thing is you can press select and then move or scroll your timeline over, and it will select as many frames as you want, and it will highlight them in blue to show you that they're selected. So for me, I made two different projects. One of the projects was the zoomed in of the fish's face, and the other project was the zoomed out of the fish's body, and I wanted them both to be in the same film. So I went to here and I selected the whole face, so all of my frames that were the face, and I clicked it after I selected it, pressed copy, went into this project, clicked here, and then pasted those frames into the other project. So you can do that. So film, all of your animations, you can put them in separate projects, and then you can dump them all in the same project and put your whole movie together. It's really easy. So remember, just highlight it, press select, and then select as many as you want. This is also really helpful when you're trying to move a whole chunk of film, right? Let's say he was smiling and I wanted there to be the fish swimming in between him changing facial expressions. So I would select all of the smiling, and then I would move it to after the swimming part. All right, and then the last thing I want to show you all is this button right here, is insert camera. So this is really helpful if you forgot to shoot something, if you forgot to film something, if you accidentally filmed something out of order and you just want to directly reshoot right in the middle of it. You press insert camera, and then wherever the camera is, it's going to show up right here. So now anything I animate will be animated between these two frames. So it's very easy. So I'm going to review all of that again because I know it was a lot. So the first thing we do, copy and paste. Very easy. You copy a frame, you paste it. This will make something last longer, however long you need it to last. Very simple. And then if you want to copy and paste larger chunks, you can press this select button, and it will highlight multiple frames that you can copy and paste within your project or even into another project. So copy and paste and select are your best friends. And the last thing you can do is you can insert a little camera and then animate directly in between frames. And that's editing. It's really simple. With the Stop Motion Studio, it ends up being a lot more intuitive. It's a great thing to teach your kids, especially if they're, above 6 years old. I think it's a great thing to teach them, show them how to do it, and then let them create their own vision. I recommend practicing editing with maybe a film that you're not as invested in, maybe one of the kind of warm-up activities we did, the exercises with growing and shrinking and transformation animation. Go ahead and practice editing with that, and then apply those skills to your next one. Editing is one of those things where the more you do it, the easier it is. So go ahead and do it. All right, so now we can finally talk about audio. So stop motion studio it's really easy to add audio. And they kind of have everything you need. So let's first figure out how to add audio while the film is playing, right? So if we click whatever frame we want to start our audio in, so for here, let's say, this is when he was swimming along and I wanted to say, I'm so hungry. So I would click this frame because that's where I want the I'm so hungry to start. And then you're going to click this little microphone, right? And this is the screen you're going to see. So this should be the frame that you clicked or the frame that you're on. And this is the screen. So then when you press record, you're going to get a countdown. And once it gets to 0, it's going to start playing your film. And you're going to record your sound. So you're going to start talking or start doing your sound effect or start playing music, whichever you've chosen. And it will start playing your film. So you can really see it in live time. And then you're going to click stop whenever you're ready. And you'll be able to review it if you press play. You'll be able to review what you just did. And then if you click the frame again and you press this audio button, you'll get this. So this is a really, really useful tool where you can cut your music, right? If it accidentally went too long, you can shorten it. You can mute certain parts of your music. You can just delete the whole thing and start over. So you can really edit your audio in this software, which is really advanced and really exciting and not present in most free softwares. So that's a big reason why I recommend this particular app, is because it's so easy to do. So another method is instead of animating first, you could just record all of your sound first, record your dialogue, record your narration, your sound effects, and then animate to the audio. And so I would say, I'm hungry. And that would show up as a little audio clip. And then I would animate my fish saying, I'm hungry. So it's a suggestion, it's really, you can play around with it. You can choose whatever you want, but Stop Motion Studio is so great because you can watch the film as you're recording your sound, and that's really exciting. So the last note I have, so if you remember the film I showed you, I had 3 layers of sound, or 3 tracks. My first track was my dialogue. It was me saying like, good morning, I'm so hungry, yum. I think that's everything that I said. The second track was my sound effects, which were bubble sounds to make it sound like the ocean. It was like, bubble, bubble, bubble. And the last track was music. It was the do, 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 do. So in Stop Motion Studio, you can have as many tracks as you want playing at the same time. However, one little glitch is that when you start recording sound, you see this little music button comes up, or this little music icon shows up on whichever frame you have recorded on. If I click this frame again to add music after I added the dialogue, it would override the dialogue that I added. And so a way to work around that is just to click the next frame and start recording from the next frame. It's not perfect, but remember, every frame is only 1/12 of a second, so it won't really make a difference. So that's just my one little note. If for whatever reason you feel like you have an extra $10 and you want to buy the pro version of Stop Motion Studio, the thing that is added is they have a lot of sound effects that you can use, and they have a lot of music that you can choose from. I don't think it's necessary, but if that is exciting to you, you can buy the full version of it and add those things. For me, I think it's more fun to kind of record my own music or my own sound effects. I don't know. I think that's more fun, but if it's easier for you to just buy the new version or the full version, go for it. But you can do everything with the free version. So I'm just going to review that one more time. So we click wherever we want to start recording. We select that frame. We press this microphone button. We record our sound as it's playing. And then if we want to edit what we just recorded, we click the frame, click this audio button, and that's how we edit. Pretty straightforward. It's not something that you can mess up. So if you press the wrong button, just start over and press a different button, right? Like it's something that once you explore a few times, you'll be able to do it really intuitively. And then just remember that if you record over the same frame, it'll override your whatever you had just recorded. So make sure you click the next frame when you're adding music or sound effects. And that is everything with audio. So the last thing I want to show you is how to export it. We've already discussed this, but just in case. So once you go back to your project board, you're going to select whatever film you want by like holding it down. I think if it's a touch screen, if it's not a touch screen, you probably just click it. And then you're going to press this little share icon. And then you can export it in whichever way you want. I recommend export movie, and then it will be an MOV. And that's that. So before I open up the floor to questions, I just want to review everything again because I know that we did a lot today. So we learned about the production process, the 6 steps of production. We learned about kind of the importance and possibilities of sound effects, which can be really useful tools for getting your message across. And then we learned 3 different steps of editing, which was adjusting your image, the actual editing, which means putting things in the correct order, and adding audio. So I know that that was kind of a lot and it was very software heavy. So if you have any questions, I am here to answer them. But I think I really want to leave you all with the message that it's just a lot easier to do when you're doing it, right? It's not as easy to like internalize from somebody talking about it. So I just really recommend exploring it. And it's really hard to mess up. It's really hard to, delete your whole project. And so just explore and see what you come up with. Explore the app, press all of the buttons that you can press. And I promise that you'll be able to put your film together in a really lovely way. And yeah, so that's everything from me. So I'm going to open the floor up for questions. Please let me know any questions that you have. And I also have a few like frequently asked questions that I can review with you all. I'm just going to drink some water and then I'll dive into the frequently asked questions. Okay, so one question that I get a lot is kind of like, how do you do this with kids, right? It's a very complicated process. It's complicated for adults. So how are we able to kind of teach kids how to do this editing process? I have found in the year of 2020 that most kids are better at software than I am. It's just a fact. I don't know what it is. So oftentimes, especially above the age of 6, if I show a few buttons, if I explain, the basics of it, I find that kids catch on really quickly and are able to manipulate their own video. Under the age of 6, I'm going to show you a little activity that is really helpful for teaching editing. So the first step is to take your storyboard. So this is a storyboard that I quickly kind of made of what I wanted the film to be. So, I had my fish swimming. He was happy. Then I wanted him to say, I'm hungry, and be sad, and then eat something, and then go back to happy and say yum. So hopefully you've already made a storyboard or a comic book. If not, maybe make one together, just do a scene together, and then cut it. So cut all of your squares. All of the squares of your storyboard. Just cut them up. And then I'm going to kind of move this on a little bit, and then arrange them exactly how you want it to go. So what did I have? I think I had, he's swimming along and he's happy. And then he says, I'm hungry, and he's sad. And then he eats something, and then he's happy again, right? So cut up your storyboard and physically do this. And if you notice, this is exactly what your timeline looks like, right? And so for visualization, it's really helpful to see that everything that you've already done, the storyboard that you've already done, that's basically a timeline. You're already editing, right? And then challenge them. Say, what would happen if we mixed up the order? And so then physically, mix up the order. What if he was hungry at first, right? He goes, I'm hungry, and he's sad, and then he's swimming along, and then he's happy because he sees the food, and then he says, yum, right? I switched up the order, kind of changes the story. And then let's say, you know what? I want to delete something. I don't want this one in there. So physically take it away and then mush the other ones together, right? And so this, I really like doing this with kids, especially under the age of 5 or under the age of 6, because it's really helpful to visualize it, but it's also helpful for to kind of give your kids the tools so they can tell you what their vision is, right? Maybe they're not the ones physically doing the editing on the software, but if you do this, they can show you exactly the way they want it. So then you can actually be the one editing it. But it's kind of hard to explain those things verbally. It's a lot easier when they have that visual so you can see their vision. And it's the first step to learning how to edit. And once you can kind of master that physicality of it, you're able to transfer that to software. So really recommend cutting up your storyboard and laying it out in a timeline. Any questions? Gonna look at my little questions. Okay, great. So I am gonna also talk a little bit about credits and titles. So I showed you one way to do it on the actual software, right? I don't know if you hear, there's a loud siren right out my window. New York is very loud. I think it's leaving. Okay. So I showed you one way to do credits and titles, and that's, in that little editing tab, you can type it out or you can draw it on your little device. But something that I like to do more than that is to animate your credits. And that can look a lot of different ways. I have animated credits with pasta and rice and candy before, right? So you just animate as the rice starts spelling out your name or the title. I've done it with clay. It's really fun to do with clay. I've done it with, actually cutting out the letters of your name and having them kind of walk around. Another great thing to do is you can just have a piece of paper and draw a part of your name, take a picture. Draw another part of your name, take a picture, right? And then it kind of looks like it's drawing itself. All great things. For younger kids, I also like, sometimes I'll draw out the buttable letters and I'll have them color in a little bit of it, take a picture. Color in a little bit more, take a picture. So the bubbled letters kind of fill in. Another great thing to do with the smaller kids is to have them spell their name if they are able to spell their name yet. If not, kind of prompt them and help them spell it. And before you do that, cut out a lot of circles and then have them put a letter on each circle. And that's a really great way to, learn a little bit about how to spell your name. And then when you animate, kind of have the circles or the letters come in a crazy way and then have them finally form their name. So that's a really great way to kind of bring younger kids into it without having them have to spell their name or physically write their name. Um, and then you can do all of this with the title as well. Whatever you decide to name your film, you can use all of those strategies to kind of animate the title and say, this is the fish movie or whatever the movie is called, but do it with animating. So those are my recommendations. They're really fun. They're also, I think it's a really fun way to kind of get kids into animating and practice animating before they go into animating their film. So it's a nice little warm up too. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, another thing I really like to do with kids, and this kind of goes on or goes into what we were talking about with distribution, is making a movie poster. And so I really recommend looking at your kids' favorite movie, and then looking up the poster for those movies. So, my favorite movie is Toy Story, and the poster is, of course, brightly colored Toy Story, and then Woody and Buzz, I think, are like hugging or something. And, kind of look at those movie posters and analyze them, think about them. Why did they choose this image? Why did they choose this font? And then create a movie poster of your own and make it pretty big, make it really detailed. And you can put the posters up around your house when you're going to, if you're setting up a little movie theater, you can put the poster up in your house. But it's also a really great thing to kind of send along in an email or a message if you're sending the film to family or friends. It just kind of amplifies the film, makes it seem a little more professional, a little more polished to have a little poster with it. So I recommend doing that, and you can animate the process, as you're making the film. Just take a picture of it every once in a while, and then it'll look kind of like a time lapse of the poster being created. And then that image can go at the end of your movie, right before your credits or right after your credits. So this is just another way to get your kids really excited about the project that they made and to elongate your film. So really recommend creating movie posters with your kids. It's very fun. Are there any other questions? I know that I kind of went really long. And I know this is being recorded, so if you want to review this anytime you want, it will be on the website. So as you're editing, you can go back to my PowerPoint explanation of how to do it. And sometimes that's really helpful as you're going through the post-production process. And all of these classes have been recorded, so you can go back to any webinar and share it with your friends, or review something that you want to remember when you're animating. All right, and so the last frequently asked question that I get is about dialogue. So we kind of we brainstormed a few different ways to have dialogue in your film, where you could record the dialogue beforehand and then edit and then animate kind of to the dialogue, so you can listen to it and animate it. But another thing that I just recommend is practicing it, right? You can play the video over and over and over again, have all of your dialogue written down that you know you're going to say, and practice it as you watch your film. And then once you're ready, then you can hit record, and then you'll be able to say it at the right time. I I think there's a lot of different ways that people do it. I recommend completely editing your film, making sure that it's really in the right chronological order before you record your dialogue. But if you want to adjust the image first, do the audio first, and then edit it together, that's also a strategy. But I like to save the audio for the very, very last thing that we do. But I really recommend writing everything out or writing your narration out. It's also nice to know, okay, our film is a minute long. How are you going to say your narration in a minute and have them practice their narration over and over and over again until they can get it to be perfectly under a minute and then record it? Otherwise, it tends to be a lot longer. It tends to be a lot more explanatory of what their idea is. So I recommend practicing it with a time constraint before recording it. And I think, learning everything that you learned today, if you choose to add dialogue, it will be pretty easy. And maybe it's not for this film, maybe you wait till your next film to add dialogue. But whatever you do, it'll be pretty easy, I think. All right, team. Well, that is everything from me. So thank you all so much for joining me in all 4 weeks of this class. And I hope that you were able to take away a lot of great things from it and are able to make some really cool movies. Please upload whatever films you make onto the website so everybody can see them. Thank you.